Shabbat Shalom. What does it mean to pray for peace? We do it all the time. We just recited the text from Psalms, Adonai Yivarech et Amo Vashalom. We ask God to shelter us in a Sukkot Shalom during Hashkivenu. We end Kaddish and the Amidah with familiar prayers for Shalom, and so on and so forth. Jewish ritual life is saturated with references to peace. You likely know that peace, shalom, comes from the root shalem, meaning whole or wholeness. And our prayers for peace are always rooted in an aspiration for integrity, integration, and wholeness. Especially in weeks like the one we are now ending, our prayers come from an awareness that the world is so far from being whole, that praying for peace is the obvious thing for us to do. That feels especially acute for us as our own city becomes the latest site of violence, as I mentioned at the beginning of services. We have reason to pray for peace during this uptick in anti-Semitism in response to Israel's actions in Gaza. And of course, we pray for a more lasting peace in the Holy Land itself. Yesterday's ceasefire has ended the most recent violence between Israel and Hamas. But we still need to pray for and call for and fight for peace. Many of us have a queasy sense of realism that this isn't really the end. And it's true that lasting peace will require more than just a ceasefire. There will need to be an end to the siege in Gaza, an end to the need for bomb shelters in Israeli cities, and an end to the occupation under which Palestinians are languishing. We're not there yet. And so we must still pray for and fight for peace. But those two things, praying for peace and fighting for peace, may in fact not be so distinct from one another. I spoke last week about how I understand power and the possibility of a just conclusion to the war between Israelis and Palestinians, a conclusion in which the status quo gives way to peace between both peoples. Tonight, I want to approach this in a different register, focusing instead on peace itself, as it appears in our tradition in key places, specifically in the form of prayer. In this week's Torah portion, Naso, we read the most ancient prayer for peace in our tradition, the familiar priestly benediction in chapter 6 of the book of Numbers. May God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God lift up God's face upon you, v'yasem lecha shalom, and give you peace. We hear these words at such diverse moments in ritual life that we might easily forget that they are, in sum, a prayer that is all about peace. Each phrase gets longer and louder, escalating into a subjunctive call for the most powerful thing with which to bless another person, shalom. I'll say those words at many weddings this summer and also in just a few days as I welcome a baby from our congregation into the covenant, hoping for wholeness during these milestones in their lives. The priestly benediction is the oldest Hebrew text we have ever found record of. Artifacts inscribed with that blessing were discovered dating back to the time of the First Temple, when Kohanim used that text to bless the people of Israel. Indeed, that's the initial purpose of the blessing, as its name would suggest, per the command in Numbers 6. Speak unto Aaron and his sons, saying, thus shall you bless the children of Israel. And it then goes on to offer us those three famous phrases. Though Reform Judaism got rid of all references to the priesthood, many Jews today hear those words in their synagogues, spoken by descendants of priests, who call to mind the ancient practice of priests blessing Israelites with peace. But this presents a dilemma for more than a few classical commentators. Isaac Arama, the medieval Spanish sage, wonders, what is the purpose of this blessing from the priests to the people? Surely it's God, he says, who blesses. So is it really up to the priests to assist God in this process? Don't be fooled, he wasn't an early Reform Jew. Isaac Arama, among others, was trying to grasp how human beings could act as agents of God. The rabbis of the Talmud try to give us an answer by saying that God blesses the priests and the priests in turn bless the people. But this workaround doesn't account for the fact that it's still people doing the work of God. And if that statement only refers to the priests, in Pirkei Avot we read the expansion of Rabbi Hillel. Be a disciple of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace. Hillel invites us all to be like priests, those initial sons of Aaron, who bless with peace and pursue it. By beckoning us all to pursue peace beyond merely the blessings of the priests, we learn that in order to bless and be blessed with peace, human beings, beyond God, actually have agency to create wholeness in this world. Yiddish proverbs and Talmudic dicta abound on the subject of human beings working to create the blessings we want to see in our lives. And we know from our own lives that merely praying for peace isn't really enough, probably, to bring peace into being. We need to create the conditions in which peace can flourish. We experience this in our own personal lives, perhaps, or in our own country. And in the case of Israel-Palestine, we need to work toward an end to the occupation such that Israelis and Palestinians can live freely and with dignity, and of course, in peace. This might mean supporting initiatives toward coexistence like Omdim Biyachad, which builds power among Jews and Arabs around dozens of issues in shared society. We need to pray for it, absolutely, but we need to support the work of real people on the ground who are making it a reality. And it may be that these two things, blessing and making it happen, feed into one another neatly. The Israeli scholar Nechama Leibovich points us to a famous text in the Talmud in Masechet Shabbat that teaches that when Moses ascended to speak with God, he found God putting the crowns on each individual Hebrew letter in the Torah. And as he watched him, as Moses watched God, rather, God saw Moses and asked somewhat angrily, Moses, aren't you going to help me? She uses this to say that God requires human assistance in blessing the people with Torah. Though everything in the world is dependent on God, ultimately human beings need to do their part. This is our task now, to pray for peace among Israelis and Palestinians, and to let those prayers inspire us to support initiatives that bring peace about, to support activists on the ground working to end the occupation and build something new, to understand shalom as impossible without shlemut, the wholeness of two sides working together. As the ceasefire holds, God willing, Israeli and Palestinian lives will slowly return to some version of where they were, albeit with more death and destruction for which to grieve. But as some people mourn and reel from the human cost of the past 2 weeks, many people will go back to what seems like normal life. I've already seen my friends in Tel Aviv post pictures of brunch with friends as if everything is okay. And surely it will not really be okay in Gaza and not really in Tel Aviv either. And the security that some people feel will be an illusion until real peace, active wholeness that Israelis and Palestinians create together becomes a reality. In a collection of midrashim known as the Sifra, rabbis comment on the priestly benediction to say that God will bless the people with material goodness. But in their commentary on the word shalom in the priestly benediction, they say that food and drink is all well and good, but without peace, they are worth nothing, for peace outweighs all else. Without peace, food and drink are an illusion. Unless you make peace, anything else you have really isn't satisfying and may not even be real. When we make a blessing for peace, when we pray for peace, what we are doing is inviting one another to do the work, not to accept an illusory peace. When we pray, we are committing ourselves to find new solutions and to support everyday people who are working toward those solutions. Yes, we are directing our prayers toward heaven, but we must also direct it toward ourselves. Yisa Adonai panav aleinu, v'yasem lanu shalom. May God lift up God's face upon all of us and grant us peace. Shabbat shalom.